Tim, we're really glad you're here.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Can you hear me all right, everyone? Okay, good. So I'm an alcoholic. My date of sobriety is the 24th of July, 1993. I have a sponsor who is a Texan. I recommend having a Texan sponsor for many reasons. I'm from London. I was born about a mile from where I'm sitting. My home group is Group 12 in San Antonio in Texas. I get to the breakfast club, which is 7 a.m. Texas time, certainly weekdays whenever I can, which is most of the time. The topic of emotional sobriety, we see I'm going to be controversial. I'm sorry. I'm going to be a little controversial. Now, I know it's very important. Emotional sobriety is very important. There's that wonderful essay by Bill Wilson, one of AA's co-founders, on emotional sobriety, the next frontier, and it's wonderful reading. When he discovers what people have been telling him for years, but he's discovered it now, so it makes its way into the wonderful article. I'm a very great fan, however, of sobriety. I've known people over the years in AA who, as it were, graduate to higher things. And some of them have come to sticky ends with alcohol. I've got to remember that I am an alcoholic. If I have a drink, I'm toast. I may never stop again. So not having the first drink is literally the most important thing in my life. However, because I'm powerless over alcohol, it is the one thing in my life over which I have no direct agency. I need to be in the thrall of a power greater than myself. And when I'm in the thrall of a power greater than myself, I couldn't drink if I wanted to. How do you know? Well, there have been times when I wanted to at 16, 17, 18 years sober, and I couldn't because my actions in AA had been so consistent that regardless of the state I was in, regardless, interestingly, I think, of the lack of emotional sobriety, I was granted physical sobriety, continued physical sobriety, because my life was structured around serving God, regardless of how I felt. So sobriety is the number one priority for me. If you have the misfortune to have one addiction, with any luck at all, you can have, well, a handful of them. And so I have other things apart from alcohol, which I must avoid one day at a time, because if I start, I may never stop. Which does invite the question, why do we even talk about emotional sobriety? Why is it even a thing? Well, first of all, it's very nice. It's much nicer to be happy and comfortable and placid. There's nothing wrong with that. If you'll permit a moment of Texan crudeness from my sponsor, he says sobriety or recovery is a bit like sex. If you're not enjoying it, you're not doing it right. So emotional sobriety can be emotional balance, can be a good sign that something is going well. But just because I'm comfortable doesn't mean I'm doing God's will. Just because I'm terrifically challenged and emotionally all over the place does not mean I'm out of alignment with God's will in a fundamental sense. My mother is 1,000 years old and my family are mad. This means that a great responsibility fell on my shoulders. I could have shirked that and remained comfortable and emotionally detached or dissociated even, but I didn't. I took up the responsibility, and the responsibility of making sure she's all right in her 90s now. So I've got legal responsibilities, I've got financial responsibilities, I've got other responsibilities. That is challenging, and I'm going to experience an abundance of human emotions. Nothing wrong with that. The question with emotions is whether they're timely, appropriate, and proportionate. That's a little good little trio. Timely, appropriate, and proportionate. Have you ever had the experience you have a conversation with someone you think you're fine, and then 2 weeks later you're full of rage? Appropriate emotions. I was someone who in my early meetings of AA would weep at unexpected moments and laugh at unexpected moments. My emotions were not appropriate to the situation. Proportionate. I know none of you overreact, but I overreact to things on a regular basis. So the aim is to it's not to emotionally flatline, it's to have emotions which are timely and appropriate and proportional. Now, as I say, it's nice to have those, it's very pleasant, and also it's nice for the people around one. That's certainly the case. But there's a lot more to it than that in terms of purpose. If I'm emotionally all over the place, it makes me dumb. I make bad decisions. I can't, it's like with water, which is churned up and it's full of mud, and you can't see the gold which is lying at the bottom of the water. So to discern God's will in subtle situations, most of the time, God's will is perfectly plain, I think. You know, go to work when you're at work, keep your mouth largely shut, be nice to people, help the people you can help. Don't try and help people you can't help. I mean, God's will is just pretty clear most of the time. But in subtle situations, in tricky situations, I need to be perfectly poised, and then I know automatically. So there's a huge benefit in order to do God's will. There's a huge benefit in having emotional sobriety. But there's a second point as well. Lack of emotional sobriety, so being emotionally all over the place, is usually a sign that there is self-will going on, which by its nature is in opposition to God's will. So it's more like it's not the problem in itself, but it's the canary in the mine. It's the sign that I'm re-engaged as the owner of my life. In step 3, I'm going to rewind slightly how the first 3 steps fit together for me. So the first step says a few things. It says, I have a mind which will tell me on occasion that a drink is a good idea. And if I'm in the habit of doing what my mind tells me, I'm going to drink one day. If I drink, I may never stop. My friend Tom, I always quote Tom on this, he expresses it better than me. He says, alcoholism is a lot like dancing with a gorilla. You're not done dancing until the gorilla is done dancing. So I've got to make sure I don't get back in the cage, right? Which means God has got to be in charge. I don't know if any of you remember Star Trek: The Next Generation. There's a character. I think I'm right in what I'm about to say. I'm sure there'll be a Trekkie who'll correct me if I'm wrong. But from memory, Riker is called number 1. that doesn't mean he's in charge. It means he's second in command. Who's in charge? The captain. And it's a little bit like that in my life. Sometimes people pray to God to help them to be on time. Yeah, but you might want to set an alarm, and you're going to have to heave your legs out of the bed in the morning. God is not going to heave your legs for you. I've got to take chief initiative in my life, but I'm number one to God being the captain, or I'm like the manager of a shop and God is the owner. I've still got to run stuff in my life. A friend of mine says, you've got to take action to activate your faith. God ain't going to slide no hot dog under your door. But it's under the guidance of God. It's under the direction of God. It's in the care of God. And it's for God's purposes, not mine. So I don't have, as we say in East London, I don't have a dog in the race when I've taken step 3. I could, as they might say, using the syntax of Brooklyn, I could care less. That should be the attitude towards my life. I am the careful custodian, but I'm not the owner of it anymore. If I'm the owner, I'm screwed. So this is the basis. This is the base. Someone might want to do a little bit of muting there. There we go. So the basis of this is I'm to be the servant of God in my life. Now, you don't go around telling people at work, I'm a servant of God. You know, as far as they're concerned, you're just the gimp in the corner typing. You just, you know, yes, sir, no, sir, 3 bags full, sir, to your boss. Fine. But inside, I know I'm here not for me. I'm here for my higher power. My higher power is going to look after me. So back to emotional sobriety. It's nice to have. If I'm not emotionally sober, it will jeopardize my link to my higher power. And lastly, the difficulty with lack of emotional sobriety is that it indicates I'm back in control again. I have objectives of my own, and I'll explain how that works as we go along. So when we take step 3, I work out of the big book. People work in different ways. I use the big book because I find it very helpful. That's the only reason why. There's no appeal to authority here. I tried it, it worked, and I carry on using it. There we go. When I take step 3, the book doesn't say, and we immediately launch into doing God's will. Now, of course, one needs a daily program as well. You know, one must do something whilst one's completing steps 4 through 9. So you try and do God's will on a daily basis, but there's a lot to get out of the way first. And I've got to do an inventory, which causes me to recoil with horror at a life run on self-will, so that I throw myself all the more fervently and eagerly into making amends, 8 and 9, and trying to live in accordance with spiritual principles, 10, 11, and 12. But there's a funny old thing. In step 4, what it says we're going to do is we're going to do a moral inventory of ourselves, not a psychological inventory, a moral inventory. This moral inventory, you'd think the first question would be about things we've done wrong. But now, I was about 25 years before I noticed this, 25 years sober before I noticed this. The first question in step 4, which directly asks me where I am morally wrong or at fault, is actually on page 67. The inventory process starts on 63. But the inventory itself starts on 67. What were my mistakes? Before then, I'm not calling out any of my character defects. I'm not calling out any of my immorality. We're looking at something else. We're looking at resentment. My feeling, this is just a hunch, but there we go. We're allowed to have hunches. That the reason it's that way round, that there's such an emphasis on resentment first for 4 whole pages in a very slim book. The book is big because of the number of stories. The basic text is very short. 4 whole pages on resentment. And I think I understand why from my own experience. Whilst I'm pointing the finger at you, I cannot look at me. When anyone tries to ask what's wrong with me, I'll respond with yes, but, and point the finger to the outside. So to do a moral inventory, the resentment has got to go, which is why you write about resentment, fine. Then you get to the top of page 67, there's stuff on 66, which is marvelous about motivations. We'll come to that. Top of 67, some prayers. And I systematically say those prayers at the top of 67 in order that I can then even do the inventory. I can then even look at myself with any hope of having emotional balance. The emotional balance is necessary for perspective and accuracy. And I've seen this time and time again. I've sponsored hundreds of people over the years. I've taken a lot of people through the steps and helped a whole load of other people because it's the job that I signed up for in step 3. It's not because I'm good. It's not because I'm nice. It's because I did what the book told me to do. I was dumb enough to do that. So for my sins, I end up sponsoring. Fine. What I notice is that when people haven't let go of the resentment, they haven't sincerely given themselves to that prayerful meditative exercise at the top of 67, all of those questions on 67, what were my mistakes? Where was I selfish? Where was I self-seeking? Where was I at fault? Where was I to blame? Where was I dishonest? What are my wrongs? The answers are nowhere near the truth. You get a completely different inventory when you're calm, when you can see clearly because the poison of resentment has been drained out. There's a book about the writing of the big book. I won't go into great details about it. It's been written relatively recently by a historian as opposed to one of the internal AA amateur historians who are very good, but it's a different kind of, the training is different, the purpose can be different sometimes. And it's extraordinary because lots of the beliefs about how the big book came to be written don't tally with this historian's work. And the longer I'm sober and the more I use the big book and I use its contents on a daily basis, the more I'm struck by how extraordinarily effective it is. Written by someone who was a few years sober, largely on his own. It was much less of a collective effort than we're sometimes led to believe through AA folklore. It's incredible to me how effective it is. And what I want to do is explain how I've used this simple amateurish stuff by someone who is not a psychologist or a philosopher or a writer to defuse my whole life problem. And essentially it boils down to the contents of 2 or 3 pages of the big book, plus a little bit on page 68 and some other neat stuff. To give you some sense of the magnitude of what I feel has been achieved in me by the higher power, activated by this process, I want to give a tiny little thumbnail sketch of what I was like and what I'm like now. And then you can judge for yourself how big the gap is. I went to a boarding school in England, maybe unsurprisingly. And a number of people were, I didn't know this at the time, I found this afterwards. People were poised, people were tasked every week with writing reports on the state of my conduct, my emotional manifestation, because people were so troubled by my troubled behavior that I was up basically under very, very close monitoring for 5 years with weekly reports sent to my parents. I was not only troubled, I was extremely objectionable to the people that surrounded me. Someone cruelly, unkindly, but not inaccurately said to me on the day we left, the only reason people talk to you is because they're so scared you're going to kill yourself and they don't want to have your blood on their hands. I was dramatic. I was violent on occasion. I was unpredictable. I was completely inconsiderate of anyone around me. I was the only person that existed in my world. It's full of rage, evasive, manipulative, and utterly dysfunction. Physically, I was screwed up like a ball. That was before I drank, right? Yeah, then add a bottle of gin a day on top of that, and all hell broke loose. I left school, I hit London, and that verb is not chosen by accident. There was no area of my life in which I was remotely functional. People said to me when I was 21, on first meeting me, you're lucky you got in so young into AA, and you were spared whatever. Once they got to know me, the tone changed, and people were surprised that I was making it at all. I was not well wrapped when I got sober. I was disruptive. I was antisocial. I had very regular panic attacks and other behaviors. Today, married for I've been with someone for 17 years. We're now married. I take up responsibilities with my family. I've got a business, got a career. I don't think of it as my career. People call it a career, but I just do things and people give me money and there we go. I teach the profession I'm in at a university. I can look after myself financially. There's no area of my life where there is compulsive behavior. There was no area of my life where there wasn't compulsive behavior. Sex, food, romance, spending, self-harm, the lot. But there is no area of my life where that is happening. I still have a full range of human emotions. I'm not recovering from being human. I'm recovering from being an alcoholic. And there's a difference. I don't need to recover from being human. And I love my life. I don't feel as that I work hard, but I don't feel like I work because I enjoy what I do, because I've made up my mind to enjoy what I do, and with the program I can. So how did I get from there to here? I didn't get from there to here. I was brought from there to here, but I had to take some actions to activate that process. And one of the things I love about why I think that the step 4 in the big book is a work of unparalleled genius. One of the reasons is it starts with where I am when I need to do inventory. So you've got 3 inventories. I won't talk much at all about sex inventory, but we've got a resentment inventory and we've got a fear inventory. It starts with the 2 things of which I am so profoundly aware. The first one is I'm resentful. I'm full of grievance. I love the word grievance. In A Course in Miracles, it uses the word grievance rather than resentment. I think it's the same thing. If you're English, you'd say disgruntled. And the program has regruntled me. I was disgruntled about everything and everyone. And fear. I would wake up in the middle of the night in order to worry, as though somehow I was failing in my duty by sleeping all the way through. My two states of being were rage and terror. Now, of course, they're the same thing. You flip one over, you have the other. And I would flip back and forth between the two throughout the day. I mean, it does give you a lot of energy, but then it makes you very tired as well. But the inventory process, I think, is brilliant. It starts with where I am. It says, right, you're upset. Good. Tell us, what did they do to you? And you get to write what they did to you. I felt like I was a pincushion and the world was pins. And I couldn't move without pins sticking in me. I remember when I was new, going to a supermarket and I had no money. I had less than no money. I remember going to the supermarket to buy some oatmeal because I could afford oatmeal. And I saw people buying broccoli and I was filled with loathing because I couldn't afford broccoli and they could. I couldn't leave the house without enraging myself and going into self-pity. And the inventory process capitalizes on this. It takes that upset, says, right, get it all out on paper. But the genius of it is this third column. So I write, who did what? First column, who? What did they do? Second column. But then it's the third column. Now, in the third column, what it asks me to do is to say, well, I'm upset by, let's say, Jill. I remember an email I got from Jill a few years ago, and I didn't like the email at all. Have you ever had an email where in the subject line it says feedback, and you know it's not going to be good? So Jill sent me one of those feedback emails, and I thought it was grossly unfair, and where it was right, it was insulting, and where it was wrong, it was grossly unfair. So I was screwed either way. And I remember my stomach hitting the floor when I saw it. And this is a perfect example. The world did it to me. I'm the pincushion, the world is pins. I'm the victim, they're the demon. But it's the third column which releases me. It says, this affects my, not this affects me, this affects mine. There are 7 things that it can affect. So to do the list first, what is the list? Personal relations, sex relations, ambitions, security, pocketbooks, pride, and self-esteem. Personal relations and sex relations. You see, once I've written that it affects those, then it asks me later on to consider it carefully. There's a question on page 67, where was I self-seeking? And I start to consider it carefully. And I ask that question, where was I self-seeking? So what's the problem? She sent me a critical email. Personal relations. How do I want her to relate to me personally? I think she shouldn't send me critical emails. In fact, she should send me emails which praise me. If there is a problem, she should shut up about it and deal with it. She shouldn't bring it to my attention. How dare she? So it turns out I'm not upset because she sent me the email. I'm upset because I have a demand which I didn't even know was there, which she failed to meet. And this changes everything, because it means that my upset is coming not from them, but from me. I don't realize I have a demand until someone fails to meet it. It's like strewing the world with landmines. When other people step on the landmine, I blow up. I don't realize there's a landmine until I blow up. So personal relations, she should not criticize me. If there's a problem, she should deal with it some other way. Just leave me to it. So those are the scripts, personal relations, sex relations, the scripts I give other people. Well, why do I have these scripts? Why do I not want her to criticize me? Why do I want her not to bring those to my attention? Well, I've got some more demands behind the scripts. I've got certain outcomes in mind, which are jeopardized by her. What are those outcomes? I like money. When I'm in self, I like money, pocketbooks. If she thinks my work is terrible, she'll stop giving me work. That might affect my income. What if I can't get a replacement client, if she boots me completely? And it turns out I've got a demand for a certain income that I think I'm entitled to. And as soon as anything gets near that, I snarl. That's what the resentment is. It's snarling like a wolf back at whatever threatens me. So I've got a demand in the area of pocketbooks. It turns out I've got a demand in the area of security. To be okay, I need somewhere to live. I need the ability to pay my own way. I have ambitions. I want to be absolutely super at my career. I want to be the best possible, whatever it is that I do. I'm not going to say what I do. And then it's even worse. So we've got some scripts, we've got some demands with these outcomes, which I've set my heart on. And when anything comes near them, I snarl. But then pride and self-esteem. My image of myself, I'm just going to say I'm a professional, whatever that is. My image of myself is under threat. If I literally think I'm that professional and someone thinks I'm unprofessional, my literal existence is under threat. That is why my stomach hit the floor as though I were a caveman facing a saber-toothed tiger. I respond to threats to my image like they're threats to my actual self. I get the same physical fight or flight response as when I'm literally threatened by someone as I was once with a knife. Same feeling. This tells me that I really believe I am that image of myself. Self-esteem. Something affects my self-esteem if my image is tied up with something in the world and something threatens that. My image of myself. Pride is the same thing, but it's her image of me. So it turns out I've got demands in these 7 areas of self. Personal relations, sex relations, the scripts, ambition, security, pocketbooks. Those are the outcomes. And then the image ones, self-esteem and pride. So all we know so far is for me to be resentful, 2 things have to happen. I've got these self-seeking demands and we've got someone else's behavior. The book is brilliant. It systematically goes through all of the reasons why I want to be rid of this. First of all, have you noticed that being angry doesn't stop bad things from happening? Have you noticed that? Have you noticed how when there's a mess, you can clean it up without being angry? So if the dog poops on the kitchen floor, you don't need to be angry with the dog. You can just clean it up. Anger is not necessary to act right. So it doesn't serve any purpose. And, you know, the famous Stoic idea, if you're an archer who is all emotionally charged up about hitting the target, she won't hit the target. So to act right, to act well, I actually need to be free of anger. It's completely useless. It cuts me off from God and I will drink again. it's also embarrassing. It's embarrassing to have my emotions in the hands of the people who I least respect. My other half is emotionally balanced, and I said to him, not in recovery, and I said to him once, he's very senior in what he does. He's the head of something for the whole of London. So lots of people get angry with him on a regular basis and say so in very public meetings with hundreds of people. I said, how do you deal with it when someone is resentful with you? And he said, first of all, they need to get over it because it gets in the way. And secondly, I'm embarrassed for them because it's so childish. When I vented at him or vented in his presence, there were a couple of things he said. One of them was that, and he gestures in the general direction of my venting. He said, that needs to stop. If you permit it, it will take over. In the book, it talks about permitting resentments. Resentments don't happen to me. A situation offers me an opportunity and I run with it. The resentment is my responsibility. It's not something, it's not an event that occurs to me. And when I present a problem, his first response is, so what are you going to do about it? He scoots straight over the top. And this is what emotionally mature people do. I need to get over it because it gets in the way. How? First of all, there's a line on page 61. Is he not a victim of the delusion that he can wrest happiness and satisfaction from this world if he only manages well? I've got to recognize that if my scripts were followed, my outcomes were achieved, and my image were maintained, I would be no further ahead than I was at the beginning. And this has been demonstrated time and time again in my life. When I was 24, 25, I completed a professional qualification, which had taken years and which I'd sacrificed my life for. And in the professional exams, I came first in the country. And I was happy for a day. And the next day I thought, I've lost 3 years of my life for a bit of paper. Great. So my resentment in my life, I'm unhappy because I've not got something which would not make me consistently happy if I got it. It's completely insane, is what it is. Secondly, so this is how I remove the demands. Why do I even demand this? The fact of having the demand is what is creating the unhappiness in the first place. No demands, no unhappiness. My sponsor's sponsor says, the only reason you're unhappy is because you haven't got your own way. If you don't have a way, you can't be unhappy. So I drop the demands. Then I look at the other person. Usually they're not behaving badly. They're just, as Clancy brilliantly says, they're just living their lives and I happen to be in their way. That's all, not personal. Even when they're behaving badly, when I behave badly, I'm powerless, not guilty. I am driven by ego, not led by God. So when they are behaving badly, they're driven by ego, not led by God. The whole point of ego is powerlessness. There is only one show in town, and I'm trapped in it, and I can't see a way out. So I extend that courtesy to other people to recognize that they are the same. They are trapped and they cannot spring themselves from the trap. And then we like them, it says, we like them. And if you say we like them for long enough, you end up saying we like them. I identify with them. what fear might have motivated them? Have I ever had that fear? There's a limited number of human fears, let's face it. And I realize I'm looking at myself. And then there are some prayers. This is a sick person, or this person is as they are for reasons I cannot possibly fathom. That's a slightly more courteous way of putting it. They are as they are for reasons I cannot possibly fathom. You know, at worst, they deserve my compassion. This person is as they are. How can I be helpful? Usually I can't, so I must go away and be helpful somewhere else. God save me from being angry because I'm the one that's in trouble. Thy will be done, because it's going to be anyway. As Dag Hammarskjöld said, for everything that has been, thank you. For everything that shall be, yes. So that's resentment. Behind resentment is fear. Why am I frightened? Because I believe I'm a body, trapped in the world, maybe with the prospect of collecting some possessions, collecting some temporary, illusory security, getting some love, some respect, some validation, some attention, some acclaim before I die. This is the materialist view. So materialism is not just about I like stuff. It's about seeing the material as the ultimate reality. In my experience, if I believe I am my physical form and my biological sex and my gender and my sexual orientation and my ethnicity and my socio-demographic ranking and whatever, my background, my job, where I live, my home group, who I hang out with, every single one of those things is fragile. And I'm going to be frightened. The only way not to be frightened is to dissociate. Fear always bleeds through the bandages, though, in my experience. There's only so long you can dissociate once you've had to give up all of the addictions which are going to kill you too quickly for comfort. And the fundamental question had to be faced: who am I? On page 68, I get to write a list of fears, which is not very illuminating. What is illuminating is Bill's rhetorical question, which arrives immediately afterwards. We asked ourselves why we had these fears. Wasn't it because self-reliance failed us? He doesn't trust us to answer the question, so he answers it for us. I used to live in Russia and I went to university in Russia. And that's the teaching method there. They ask a question, then they immediately answer it. There isn't a cigarette paper's gap for anyone to get their own answer in. You're just going to be told. And Bill does this here. What is self-reliance? It's not just not asking for help and being a jerk about things. I think there's a deeper sense. Whether it was intended by Bill or not, I don't know, but it works, and it's this. If I'm reliant for my identity, my value, and my purpose on my human manifestation, my physical form, I am screwed, because the planet is not a very safe place to be. It's not a very stable, predictable place to be. Look at the empires that have fallen. Read Marcus Aurelius. It's very clear how many Romans, there were millions of Romans. How many of them have we even heard of today? A handful. Specialists, a few hundred. Nothing is going to last. I better hope I am more than a $10 bag of chemicals, which is what Bill W. referred to the human body as. I'm 90% made of water on a planet where water evaporates at room temperature. It is impossible to be identified with the physical form and not be at some level aware of how squashable and snappable the human body is and how open it is to attack in every way before we even get on to image and reputation and wealth and friendship and love and all of those things which come and go. If you're not sure about those come and going, watch television, watch Netflix. Every Netflix show pretty much is about how nothing lasts and everything is fragile. So identity, value, purpose. What is my identity? I am spirit. I happen to be currently communicating through a human form, which at some point will disappear. I was never born. I will never die. It's the identity. Anne Lamott says death is a fairly major change of address. Identity. What am I? I'm spirit. Spirit cannot be hurt. If I'm spirit, I cannot be hurt. That is who I am. What am I worth? As spirit, I'm part of a great whole. You look at a bunch of little primary school, elementary school kids, and if someone would say to you, oh, well, how much is each of those worth? Which one is worth more than another one? Clearly, each one is of infinite worth. If you like cats, it's the same with cats. Each cat is its own universe. I'm spirit, I'm of infinite worth. To hold otherwise is grotesque and is to align myself with regimes over history that have accorded particular values to particular categories of people or individuals. To hold that a person is anything other than of infinite value is to align oneself with those regimes. So my identity is I'm part of the higher power. God is the sun with the rays. That's my view. I may be wrong, but it's working for me, so I'm going to go with it. There we go. And that's not an unreasonable position. If you're interested in a philosophical position for that, the American school of pragmatism is all about what is true is what works. And it creeps into the big book even, but it has a sound philosophical basis. It's not just wishful thinking. Identity, value, and purpose. My purpose is to stay awake and help other people stay awake or wake up in the first place. That is it. So this is why I don't have a career. My job every day is to do what God wants me to do, and I trust that my purpose will be fulfilled through that one way or another. But it is not up to me to see the other side of the tapestry. You know, if you see a tapestry, you can see the threads dangling on one side, but you can't see the picture on the other side. The jigsaw puzzle piece cannot see the picture that the jigsaw puzzle makes. The jigsaw puzzle piece cannot see the picture. So I must not look at what the picture is because it's impossible. 5 minutes. Thank you, Susie. I don't get into that. The question of trying to estimate whether my life has value, whether my life has purpose. That's given to God. How dare I even question that? My job is simply to say to God every morning, what do you want me to do? And then my job is to do it. As Bob B says, you know, the two skills, to show up at work and to work while you're at work. That'll take 10 years how to learn. Many years ago, I bought a volume called the Oxford Book of Prayer. I don't own it anymore. I threw it away. I'm sure it's very good. I did read large chunks of it. But I threw it away because I found the one prayer that I needed. And I don't even know the prayer verbatim. But the essence was this. It was by a London kitchen porter. maybe even a kitchen in a hospital porter, a kitchen porter in a hospital, where his prayer to God every morning was, here I am, showing up for duty. That's all. That's enough. I might do some other fancy things. Okay, I mean, I have done a course in miracles, and I still do it. But that's not the. That's the decor. That's for fun, frankly. That's the decoration. The meat and the potatoes of this is trusting God. There we go. How do you trust God? Well, I'll tell you how. Then I'll finish mercifully. Two stories. I was talking to my other half. His ears will be burning right now, I'm sure. I was talking to him about a friend of ours who was very jealous in their romantic relationship. And Jonathan said a very simple thing. He said, either you trust them or you don't. If you don't trust them, you shouldn't be in the relationship. You have no business bringing your insecurities in. Trust them or don't trust them. Seneca, who is worth reading twice, writes these letters. And in one of them, he's responding to someone who claims to have been let down by a friend. And he says, you haven't been let down by your friend. You've got terrible judgment in choosing friends. You chose as a friend someone who wasn't trustworthy. There are two phases. There is the discernment phase, when you discern who is worth trusting. And when you discern that they're trustworthy, you trust them. And I think it's like that with God, that I discerned by observing the successful living of people around me in AA, and I'm going to give Al-Anon a plug. In Al-Anon, I'd be dead without it. And so would some other people. Seeing those people around me helped me believe that God is good. And that's enough. My job is simply to trust and to get on with it and to leave the rest of the world to take care of itself. As C.S. Lewis, as a character says in a C.S. Lewis novel, you're only told your own story. So leave other people to find out theirs. That's all I've got. Thanks for listening.
Brilliant, Tim. Thank you very, very much for sharing with us. I have notes from here and there, and make no mistake, I will listen to you a couple more times to take it all in. I certainly appreciate what you had to say. Thank you. So Tim has presented us with a lot of stuff, and I have a feeling some of you have some questions or you have comments. And if you do, please raise your hand. I'll call you in the order that you do raise your hand. And if you could keep what you share to 2 minutes, that would be super. Okay, so Tara, you're first in line.
I'm Tara. I'm a grateful alcoholic. Thank you very much, Tim, for sharing your experience and hope today at the Friends Circle. I was very excited. Oh, sorry. It was an amazing message. I learned a lot today. And my question is, how long have you been doing 12-step recovery? And I like the fact that you explained about using the 12 steps in your everyday life. Thank you. Yesterday's history, tomorrow's a mystery. The only step we need to take by ourselves is step one. It's a we program for a reason. And if no one's told you today they love you, I love each and every one of you in this room, on this platform. And I wish you all another 24 hours. And thank you for keeping me sober for this 24 hours.
Tim?
Yeah, so when I was new in AA in 1993, I did the steps in a good old-fashioned way, very Pacific Group style. Pacific Group, Atlantic Group style, I'm told. When I was 15, 16 years sober, I was extremely dissatisfied. And I found a bunch of tapes by Mark Houston and Joe Hawke. I traced back the lineage and listened to Bob Olson, Clint Hodges, Gary Brown, Paul Martin, Big Frank McKibben. I've got a sponsor from that chain now. And in the space of 3 months, I did precisely and fully what the big book suggested, and the top of my head blew off in a good way. The last 12, 13 years since then have been window dressing. The change happened by completing every single last amend. I wouldn't give you tuppence for how I made most of those amends, but I made them. They weren't elegant, they weren't graceful, they were reasonably polite, but they were done. And it was that plus the universal forgiveness and then throwing myself into service. So it's not about, 28, 29 years can help you put across the message maybe, but the freedom comes from completing the process. I see people who are 9 months, 1 year, 18 months sober, who complete the process, who are rocketed into the fourth dimension. And it's simple actions. It's not an advanced thing. It's a basic thing, but it does need to be done. There's a line in Bill's story. Ebby says to him, when these things were done, if 100 balloons, each with a string, are tied to the ground, all tied together, you have to cut all 100 strings for the whole array of balloons to fly up in the air. If one of the strings is not cut, the whole thing is kept tied to the ground, which is why one retained grievance or one unfinished amend or one unmet obligation is enough to keep me trapped in self. So I think it's about completion. It's not an advanced thing, it's a basic thing. That's all.
Thanks, Tim. Thank you very much. And thank you, Tara, for your question. And glad you're here. Lizzie, come on in.
Hi, I'm Lisa. I'm an alcoholic, and I want to thank everybody here for all your service. Thank you so much, Tim, for your talk tonight. And I had a question. You had talked when you first started talking about the four-step inventory. You had mentioned some book. I don't know if I missed it or if you got off on another point, but you talked about some book that, some thin book or something that had something that you wanted to mention or something. And I don't know if I missed that or if I distorted what you said. So I just was wondering if, yeah, you could clarify that.
Yeah, so I think what you're referring to was my mention of a book on AA history, and there are lots of official AA ones, but there's the Ernest Kurtz books, in my opinion, very well researched and very interesting. But the most recent one is by William Scharberg, Schaberg. It's very long, and you've got to have a strong stomach for it because it's very long and very detailed. But it's meticulously researched. So if you're interested in how the big book came into being, and you want to scoot past lots of the myths that developed over the years, and maybe for good reason the myths developed, but they did develop. If you want to scoot to what actually happened, that's the book to look at. I think it's very interesting.
Does that answer your question, Lisa?
Yep, that's good.
Cool. Thanks a lot. Glad you're here. Herb, come on in.
Hi, my name's Herb. I'm an alcoholic. Tim, thank you so much. Fascinating, wonderful, articulate, deeply experienced. I really enjoyed it. And my lineage comes from the same lineage of Don Pritz and Joe Hawke and Mark Houston. I know the people and I've had experience with them like you have. just I'd like you to comment a little bit more about the statement that you made, and I understand it, but perhaps maybe a little bit more commentary on it might be helpful. You said, I think you said, I'm not in charge of my life. God manages my life, or God owns my life, or something along that line. And I really see people talking about that more in the context of passivity and lack of taking ownership and responsibility for their own lives. I hear people talk about giving God the keys to the car. And my personal take on it is that, no, it's my car, it's my responsibility. I need to drive the car, and I need to listen to the GPS so that I have direction. So perhaps you could just clarify a little bit the comments that you made there, because I know that you probably have a similar take on it like I do.
Yeah, so I think it's terribly important to use language accurately.
Yeah.
Particularly figurative language or metaphorical language. One's got to be very, very careful. People in a very well-meaning way will use loose metaphors, and great confusion arises. I'll give you the example. The best example is that I use the driving example as well. People say you need to get out of the driving seat. Now, I understand why they say that, because if I've done terrible things, I need to stop doing the terrible things. Fine. But my view is, what is self-will?
Mm-hmm.
Self-will, by the way, is not my will. I believe God's will for me is to be happy and connected. And I believe my will for me is to be happy and connected. Self-will is the whispered agenda of my ego, which rides over the top of that. The ego speaks in my own voice. I think it's me that's speaking, and it's not, it's my ego. And it talks about being driven, page 62, being driven by 100 forms of self-pity and fear and self-delusion and so on. And if I dare say this, I'm not a Christian, but in Romans chapter 7, it talks about a similar thing. It says being, you're either going to be a slave to sin or you're going to be a servant of God. So the change that takes place, the shift that takes place, and this is why the imagery is difficult, because it's difficult to come up with a perfect image which captures the complexity of it. But the image of what I should be, I still drive the car, but God is the satellite navigation system. God is the petrol in the engine. But I have to pay attention. I have to take the action. I have to take the initiative. And this is enshrined actually in the concepts. So in the concepts, if you're not familiar with them, they're a system whereby AA can work together to get things done. Ultimate authority and responsibility lies collectively with the fellowship as a whole, and behind that is the higher power operating through the individual consciousness of the individual members making up the fellowship. But authority and responsibility are gradually delegated to the general service representatives and to the delegates and to the conference and to the board and to the organs of the board. And it trickles down, the responsibility and authority trickles down. So there's this notion in the concept of delegated authority. You've got right of decision in concept 3 to do the job as you see fit, but it's within the brief that's been given to you. And it's like that in my life. God gives me a general brief, but I've got to take chief initiative and active responsibility for managing the process from there. Another image which I think works very well, so I've got to be in the driving seat, but be properly directed and led, and be very careful how I do it. Another image, it's the difference between being an owner of a shop who's also managing it and being the manager of a shop where the owner calls in once a day with instructions. So you are in charge as the manager of what goes down on the shop floor, but you're ultimately responsible and accountable to this higher authority. And I think this is the balance. This is a good way of, I find, of balancing it. So that I do become responsible for my life and I don't turn into a sort of supine milksop, just accept that there's clearly work that needs to be done in the world. I give you an example. A friend of mine, I don't think he goes to meetings anymore, but he teaches mindfulness. He trains people in all sorts of psychological things very well. But his cleaner, he's from London, his cleaner is from Poland and went back to Poland at the beginning of the pandemic. And he's been out there for 2 weeks. He's helping run now a very large charity helping Ukrainian refugees. They're feeding 1,000 people a day. They're doing lots of other things. And he was on the news this morning. It's all very well praying for people, but as C.S. Lewis says, praying for people doesn't require me to make any effort or to do anything. It's all very, I can sit in my armchair and do it. It's much easier to pray for someone than it is to do something for them, particularly someone you don't much care for, you don't know. To me, he is a perfect example of someone who is a servant of God. He's seen an opportunity to do a manifest good, and he's inconveniencing himself. He's put his own life on hold to do that. I bow down to that. It's extraordinary. So it's this idea of being an intelligent agent of God. And I don't want to belabor the point. One last image. You know, that those apocryphal stories at the end of the Second World War, where people would go around Europe, see these statues of Jesus where the arms have been blown off, and people would put signs below them saying he has no hands but yours. And one doesn't have to be a Christian to understand the point that it's all very well, but we've got the fact that we can take action in our lives is pretty good evidence that that might be what God's will is for us. If it wasn't, why are we capable of action? Why are we capable of exercising will? That's my take on it. I might be completely wrong, but I hope that answers your question.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks, Herb. I have a question in the chat. Okay, you ready, Tim? It says, I have a question. With amends and completion of amends, what if people refuse to see you to make the amends? Will I be free with willingness alone?
Absolutely. In one of the religious traditions, if you try to make amends to someone 3 times and they refuse, the burden of the sin goes over to them. It's the effort, it's the willingness and the effort that frees me. Whether they want, I've done my side of it. It's like in a hotel where you have communicating doors between 2 rooms. Both doors need to be open so the door needs to be open on both sides to pass through. I've done my part. I've done my demonstration. As the book says, it's water over the dam. I can hold my head up high because if anyone questions me, I can say, well, I went to them. I apologize. They weren't having it. Anything else I can do for you? We're done. So absolutely not everyone wanted to hear from me. I tried and tried again, and they all eventually said yes. So took 15 years at one point, but they eventually said yes.
Thanks, Tim. That was important to hear. Sarah, come on in. Oops, I just screwed up. Sorry. You should be okay there.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'm Sarah, and I'm an addict. Tim, that was beautiful. I mean, it really was. And the content it wasn't just the content, it was the way you express yourself. And you're so succinct. I love the way you speak. And I have issues with expressing myself. So I really appreciate that in you. My question is about knowledge versus internalizing it to where basically traveling from your head to your heart. Like everything you said makes complete sense to me in my head, but I'm convinced that in a situation, there are times that I cannot, no matter how much knowledge I have, my reaction, my emotions are going to take over. Quickly, I hope it's okay to give an example just because it illustrates this. I joined a group in a fellowship, and the chairperson of this meeting was not following traditions. It was her meeting. She didn't let anybody else do service. And I kind of observed this, and I saw her become very emotional and take everything personally. And it was like I was witnessing, and I saw that this was not going anyplace good, and it didn't. And it ended up just blowing up this group. And I found myself in the situation where I am now the chairperson. And I felt at the time like it was God's will, because I knew that I wasn't emotionally attached. I knew I could make decisions because I didn't take things personally and I wasn't emotionally attached. Well, it's been about 6 weeks and we've had several business meetings, and now I'm taking things personally, and I'm becoming like when my friends' opinions differ from mine, I'm taking it personally. And I know this and I can see this, but in the moment, it's written all over my face, and I don't have control I feel like I don't have control over my reaction. And despite the knowledge of, understanding that everybody's going to have, that it's not about me, I'm really struggling right now with this. And it just seems like a good example maybe of this, is there a way to separate yourself? Is there a way to not react, I guess? I mean, taking all the knowledge that I have, can I actually put it into practice? So thank you. I appreciate it.
Got it. Got it. Okay, so there are actually several different questions in there. The first one, there's a question of punching above your spiritual weight. I play the piano. I play a lot of Haydn, and lots of Haydn is very, very quick. The little fingers going up and down the keyboard. In a performance situation, if I haven't been training really, really carefully, I'll go to pieces. The stuff I can play on my own in my room is harder than the stuff I would dare perform. I will only perform a couple of notches lower than I'm actually capable of, because when there's lots of incoming input, it lowers your ability to respond appropriately. So either I play simpler pieces if I'm performing, or I play slower. Now so there are two ways of approaching this. Sometimes I've had to bow out of situations thinking, right, I know I should be able to handle this. When I was 8 years sober, I was the finance director of one of the dot-coms. We were losing, as all dot-coms were, millions of pounds of other people's money every month. And I bowed out of that. It could have been dealt with spiritually, but I didn't have the spiritual depth to be able to do it. And I realized, have the grace to know when you're out of your depth. That's the motto. Have the grace to know when you're out of your depth. Maybe in 5 years' time, I can handle something like that. But it's in the moment, what the skill to acquire is the skill of slowing oneself down, practicing pausing in every other situation means that when I'm in a stressful situation, the training is more likely to kick in. Tom W. says that for every year of recovery, he gets an extra second of response time. And when he says, so currently I now have 43 seconds before I have to respond. I've actually been on the phone in tricky situations where I'm pausing for such a long time. They think I've put the phone down, so they put the phone down. I'm just pausing. What I can do in the pause is say, God, right thought or action. Bottom of page 87, when agitated or doubtful, agitated is any emotional upset, like resentment is any emotional upset. It's a reaction to. When I'm agitated or I'm doubtful, I don't know what to do, right thought or action. At least then I'll probably behave well and I can debrief with my confidant later on. But unfortunately, this journey from the head to the heart, yeah, you're right, it takes a long time. I've had to get burnt again and again and again and again by myself. I'm not burnt by other people. I'm burnt by myself. I knew all of the Al-Anon theory at 17 years sober until I met someone who is in mid-relapse, who I clicked with. We're best friends today, but I walked through that relapse of his, making every single Al-Anon mistake I'd been telling people about for 17 years. I had to, it's only by unfortunately, it's only by the experience that you can learn it, but the experience is the curriculum. This is the design. The design is, here's a situation for you to learn, turn it into a game. There we go. That's my answer to that. I hope some of that helped.
Thanks, Tim. Okay, here's my dilemma. I have a question in the chat and I have 5 people's hands up. And I have 8 minutes left. Can we go over a little bit, or do you need to stop exactly at the hour?
I'm all right. I'll just let
Okay,
someone know.
then let's press on. I'm going to do the question in the chat because they have asked me the question twice. And it says, can I ask a question about hallucinogenics taken in a medically supervised environment to treat depression? What
That's
can
not
you
a
say about?
question.
I know,
Okay.
I know, but can you say something about that?
I have no opinion on this matter. I will share my own experience. I'm slippery, tricky, and devious with chemicals and with behaviors which give me a kick. As a friend of mine says, if it almost works, I'll become addicted to it. My primary purpose in life is to live a worthwhile life. If I happen to be happy, yay! But it's not my primary purpose. My primary aim is to live a worthwhile life. Depression is a very broad term. I was diagnosably depressed. What I'm about to say is not addressed to anyone. It may apply only to me. So people can legitimately have utterly different experiences about the area of depression. I'll tell you my experience, as I say, which may not be like anyone else's. My first sponsor, who was a doctor, said, when I said I was depressed, he says, you're not depressed, your life is depressing. If I believed the things you believed, thought the things you thought, and did the things you did, I would be depressed too. And I found that my depressed state, which was clinically measurable, was a function of my belief system, my attitudes, my thoughts, my behavior, my unprocessed past, my philosophy of life, my position vis-a-vis religion, my how I dealt with food and sex and money, how I dealt with other people, social difficulties, professional. It was a function of being dysfunctional in 100 ways at once, which rendered me in a state sometimes of catatonic depression, curled up, unable to. I had a period of 5 days of catatonia when I was about 15. Well, I couldn't move and I couldn't communicate. In my case, it took years. It was a very painful process to unpick the causes one by one by one by one by one. I don't recommend my path to anyone else. All I can say is this is the path that I did. I've seen people who approach the question of depression radically differently than me, and they get amazing results. They are happy, they're successful, they help people. They did it so differently, and I have complete respect, and I would not interfere with what anyone else is doing. All I can do is say what has worked for me, and it may or may not work for anyone else. So I hope that was backed off enough from that topic.
I think that was an excellent way to answer it. Thank you very much. Johnny, would you like to come in and ask a question or make a comment?
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm Johnny. I'm an alcoholic, and I really appreciate the meeting. Thanks, Tim, for everything you said. A lot of clarity for me, and a lot of answered a lot of my questions already. On that last note, I believe that my depression, anxiety, which I still have, is a symptom of fear and expectations, and a symptom exactly what you just said about the way I'm living my life. I have a lot of depression at the moment. I'm stuck. What resonate what you said, I'm stuck in that fight, flight, freeze mode, like the caveman with the saber-toothed tiger. I believe that I feel like the world's a threat, and I believe that that it's that what you were talking about, the delicate nature. I've written this down: delicate nature of basing my security, my goals, my fulfillment on my image, status, and wealth on me as a thing, not as a spirit. But I'm really stuck at the moment. I went through the 12 steps in the treatment center. We did it the NA way. I'm 22 months clean and sober. I am an alcoholic. Drinking was my drug. But I haven't since leaving. I haven't got another sponsor that I've stuck with, and I'm not at the moment, and I'm feeling very stuck in anger and fear and procrastination and perfectionism, a lot of perfectionism. I'm not good enough, and I'm isolating because of it. But everything you said, especially on step 4, really helped me a lot, and I'd been reading your blog about it before I came on here, and the message is clear action. The message is clear action. I need to make more amends. I need to sort out my resentments. And my question, that was just to share how powerful this was for me from what you were saying. My question really, and I hope this isn't inappropriate, but I was wondering if you're free for sponsorship at the moment, and if at least I may speak to you outside of this group. I hope that's not inappropriate to say in this setting.
If anyone would like help with their addiction or their alcoholism, grab my number, use WhatsApp. The number there is good if you're in America. I'm not in America, but I go to American meetings. So if you're in the UK, just knock off the 011 at the front, go straight in with the 07793. So I've got a home group. I've got various groups I go to. So what I would always say is come to my groups, and this is not just to you, this is to anyone. Come to my groups, hang out with us for a month or so, see if you like it. I buyer beware with sponsors. Boy, sponsorship. You could have an evening on sponsorship. Let me tell you. That's a complicated topic. So it's something that should be entered into in an unhurried way, but certainly I can start the conversation with anyone who cares to contact me.
Thank you. I'm in the UK, and I'll WhatsApp you. Appreciate you listening to me.
My pleasure.
Thanks, Johnny, and thanks, Tim. Sarah, come on in.
Hi, I'm Sarah. I'm lots of different addictions, and I really get you in terms of what you just said about, if it almost works, I could get addicted to it. And I just wanted to share something that I really love. I'm doing step 4 in another fellowship, and at the moment, and I've been sober in AA for 15 years, but like this kind of idea of emotional sobriety is like where it's at for me right now. But someone's mentioned something in a meeting the other day about resentment, about holding on to anger to protect the self, to stop them hurting me again, to stop them like as a way of kind of like as being a kind of, I don't know, a sort of shield from other people hurting me. And it was just a really interesting way of like, I hadn't heard of resentments in that way before. And I just wondered what you thought. And did you also get other, apart from Al-Anon, have you been to like a whole raft of fellowships, or did you manage to just stick with 2? Because I've done AA, I'm now in SLA, I can see ACA like in my future. And I just like, or yeah, do I have to keep going? I don't, at the moment, I'm really enjoying the newfound kind of enthusiasm I have, and the kind of the hope I have in that things are going to shift again in a new way. So I don't mind if I do have to go to 100, if I have to, at the moment.
Okay, so the boss level hack for recovery is Big Book plus Al-Anon 1 day at a time. That little blue book will blow your mind. But I've got lots of friends in different fellowships, and hanging out with people in different fellowships is great. People do different things. I just do those 2, and but I find that the Big Book stuff has actually dealt with the compulsive behavior in every other area, except with the Al-Anon. I needed extra help with the Al-Anon because I'm so broken in that area. But your other question, which is the trickier, more interesting one in a way, is the one about anger as a defense. Yeah. Okay. So resentment is mental attack. In A Course in Miracles, it talks about attack thoughts. It's a very good phrase because it's literally what goes on in my mind when I'm resentful. I'm mentally arguing with, attacking, deconstructing, retaliating against people, whoever, pulling them down, pulling them apart. Sarcasm is literally tearing, in Greek, tearing at flesh. I'm tearing at their flesh, trying to diminish them and destroy them. It feels like it is a defense against an attack. But here's the thing. Where is the resentment taking place? It's taking place inside my brain. So where is the attack felt? This is not felt by them. It's felt by me. And because I feel attacked, attacking back feels justified. So it's this they have these nuclear reactors which are sort of self-propagating, fast breeder reactors where it just sort of churns over and over and over. I attack someone else. I feel the attack inside myself, so I attack again. Now, here's the thing. I've often heard people say that their character defects are defense mechanisms, and I understand that. I am yet to identify a so-called character defect defense mechanism which effectively did defend me from wrongdoing. I mean, look, I spent the last 30 years or so in and around the world of recovery. I met a few corkers over the years. I really have. I've been the corker that other people have met. Keeping myself safe within the world of recovery has required me to be able to observe very carefully what is going on. And to do that, I need to be detached. Jim W. of San Antonio says to help people, you've got to rise above the problem. If you're emotionally involved, you can't help them. And it's a similar principle in Course in Miracles. It talks about rising above the battlefield. At the level of the battlefield, the problems can't be solved. You need to rise above the battlefield.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks, Sarah. And I think Philomena is going to round out the afternoon or evening.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Tim. It was a pleasure, absolutely pleasure listening to you. Can you hear me? And you explain it so well, and I'm so privileged that I saw the thing on the app. I'm 73, Tim, and I lost my husband 20 weeks ago. I hope this is not an inappropriate question, but it's really ruining my life. I'm a small talk person. I don't have big words. I'm sober 5 years and 3 months, and my husband was very proud of me. He had cancer, he died, and I minded him 3 years and 3 months, and he was proud of me to be sober. And I made a promise to him I would never drink again. But I have one big problem, Tim, and you might be able to solve it. My son, who's 39, I have a daughter, she's a consultant. She's accepted I'm an alcoholic. She's a consultant in nephrology. My son, who's very, very intelligent lad, he never said a word to me all my 39 years of drinking. He was come down the stairs very anxious. He was giving me beautiful cards at Christmas, lovely, meaningful cards, and so forth. And then when my husband died, he stopped calling me. And I texted him and asked him what was the reason. And I'll just read out a text. Is that, tell me straight up, what did I do to my dear Garrett? I love you, pet, I said on the text. And this is what he texted me back. Are you honestly so disillusional that you think your alcoholism would have consequences? I don't care if you are sober these days. I have no interest or obligation to deal with you any further. Move on with your life and stay out of mine. Do not keep pushing me or I will be blocking your number. And I'm 73. And I wrote back to him and I said that, and it's just, I have no other problems. I'm able to deal with my husband's gone. And I texted him back and I said it was a mental illness. And he said, I'm not interested and none of this talking is doing you any favors. There's nothing you can say or do to change my mind. Tim, is there anything you can say to me? I'm heartbroken. And I spoiled him. I gave him lots of material things when he was young. But he did listen to rules and that. And we were in the bar and restaurant business. Thank you, Tim.
Tim, you're on mute.
Muted.
There we go. The things which have been most painful in my life. So I had 6 siblings. 4 are dead. One is has been very unwell. She's a lot better now. She's been very unwell. There are things that I did not get over quickly. It was no good people saying, you're still talking about that. Yes, I am still talking about that, I'm afraid. Took a long time to get past what happened in my childhood. People in positions of power and authority did things to me they shouldn't have done to a kid. The home I grew up in was very destructive. It's not instant, but there's a line in the big book. It's in Fred's story, where I think it's around page 42, where he says something to the effect that as soon as he made up his mind to go through the process, he felt as though the problem was solved, which it indeed was. And the way I deal with any problem is I say, right, someone else has dealt with this. Someone, or either this specific thing or something which is equivalent, something which is close enough to it. And I look and I talk and I read books, and it's engaging in the process of finding the groups, finding the people, finding the steps, finding the sponsor, listening to the talks. My God, I've listened to a lot over the years. AA stuff, Al-Anon stuff, Course in Miracles stuff, other stuff. Engaging in the process and meeting people who had recovered from that kind of loss that you're talking about. It's a terrible loss. I saw what my brother's suicide did to my mother. I know it takes a long, losing someone, whether or not they die, you're losing. I understand that. I've had losses myself. But it's engaging in the process which allows me to heal. The engagement in the process gives me enough hope to carry on. And in relationships with others, I find that the Al-Anon stuff fills in an awful lot of the detail that is given in broad outline, in skeleton form in AA. And some of the detail is filled in the traditions, a little bit in the concepts, and a lot in Al-Anon. There is I do a Sunday morning meeting. If you contact me, I've got the number there. Other people in this group will have the number too, if people don't take it down or it gets written down wrong. Sunday morning meeting, which is it's a big book workshop, but it's from the Anon point of view. It's from the Al-Anon and other Anon point of view. So it doesn't matter what fellowship you're in. If you're struggling with being in a family which is affected by alcoholism, there are lots of people there who are kind and compassionate and have been round the block a time or two and have had difficulties with parents and siblings and children and dealing with the damage within the family. So come and join us. I don't know if we'll have an answer, but at least you'll be with us, and we're not that bad to be with. So come and join us on a Sunday morning.
Thank you very
Tim,
much.
Wilhelmina, Claire just put the information about the meeting in the chat. So you can find the connection there, okay?
Thank you. So Tim, could I just leave him be? Leave him be.
I wouldn't give advice to something so complex, but your higher power and a good sponsor will help.
Thank you. I have a sponsor and I have a higher power. Thank you very much, Tim. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have a question in the chat, and then Liz just put her hand up again. I thought we were going to be done, but let's, if you don't mind, these two questions will remain, and that's it. This one is from someone in the chat. How can I relieve my mind, my brain of these resentments? I am doing exactly what you said, writing notes in my phone obsessively about all the things I'm going to tell him, say to him, etc. Attacking is the answer. Step 4, or attacking, period, is the answer. Step 4.
Yeah, if in doubt, I put myself through the sausage machine of the big book, start at the cover, go through, and I ask myself, do I identify? Do I identify? How do I identify? Do I understand this idea? When it tells me to do something, I do it. And it's best to do it under the guidance and direction of someone who's done it before, because it's easy to get a bit lost. But if in doubt, I just go back to the basics. I just pretend I'm dumb, which is not as much of a leap as I think it is. I pretend I'm dumb and just do what it says, and that works.
Thanks, Tim. Okay, Liz, come on in.
Hi, everybody. I'm Liz. I'm an alcoholic. Thanks so much for your share, Tim. I'm just always fascinated. I could sit and listen for hours on end. And the question for me is, I've just done Ernie Larson's family of origin work, because I've got this ungrounded fear of everything. I've changed my life, so I've got a very simple life. I have 2 children. I've stopped working as a high school teacher. I've got everything really simple. Don't have debts. We've got enough money, but I still have this horrible underlying fear in my stomach, and I just can't seem to get rid of it. Have you got any ideas where I can just get rid of that just royal scrunch up in my stomach? Thanks.
It's a The answer is going to be a process.
Yeah.
But to sum up what the process is, sometimes there is nothing I can do. All I have to do is just go straight to God and say, I have no idea how to handle this. You handle this for me because I am out of ideas. And while you're handling it for me, give me something useful to do. It's that combination, top of page 63 of the big book. If I stay close to God and perform his work well,
Yeah.
I'll be looked after. And unfortunately, the only way to let go is to let go and to trust.
Okay.
And it's impossible to tell someone how to do that other than just to look inside. That's the only thing I know how to say there.
Okay. Yeah, I love God. He's my best thing in my life to me is God. And I'll do that. Yeah, I've never said that prayer. So thank you, Tim. Thanks a lot.